Hello, Dog Nation. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. Glad to have you with us here today for what is going to be a really fun show. I think we have probably three. Now, we have a lot more news than this, but in particular, we have like three news stories that are as weird as anything we've ever had going on the same day. It is going to be some strange topics addressed, and certainly all of them indicative of the brand new world in which we live in this modern college football age. Obviously, Georgia in the middle of all of this. Our buddy Terrence Edwards, the great former Georgia wide receiver, stops by today there as well. So what do you say? Without further ado, we just buckle it up and get it going. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Merriweather and Tharp, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Merriweather and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Let me make a simple point off the top of the show that in the new world in which we're about to live when it comes to college football, particularly right here in the SEC, not every coach in the sport is cut out for this. What is it the kids say? Some people just don't want that smoke. I think there are some coaches who might not particularly want the smoke that's on its way, if you'll allow me to say it that way, in the new look SEC, where I don't care how you slice it, adding in an Oklahoma and a Texas to the what we assume is the westernmost version of the SEC, whether it's pods or, subdivisions or, full-on division, whatever else, that's going to slide, the Auburns, the Alabamas, teams like that, a little more towards the eastern part of this conference. No matter how you subdivide this, everybody's schedule stands to get a little bit more difficult because you've added two pretty tough teams. And listen, I like taking shots at Texas. I like taking shots at Oklahoma. But the fact of the matter is, Texas won a national championship kind of in this 21st century. Oklahoma's been a playoff team many times. They've also won a national champion in the 21st century. They've all got Heisman trophies. I mean, these are not doormat programs, even if someone like me, a rabid partisan, likes taking jabs at them every now and then. These are still programs that are tough outs on any given Saturday type basis. So the SEC schedule is now going to be tougher. And as I said before, that's tough for some programs to deal with. I mean, I can remember Dan Mullen, Florida coach, for instance. Remember a couple of years ago when he was facing some questions of, hey, are you guys going to upgrade your non-conference schedule? Are you guys going to go play more of these big Power 5 non-conference home-and-home type things? And Mullen kind of did that sort of goofy shrug the way that he does and say, we already play Florida State. The kind of coach who looks at his schedule and say, our schedule's tough because we're already playing Florida State, a team that scuffled just to even get a winning record for most of the last 5 years. That's the kind of coach who I wonder, how much is he going to thrive in a league in which on any given Saturday you're now playing a team that could beat you? I don't think Georgia fans, though, when it comes to Kirby Smart, have as much to worry about on that. And I do think this really matters. I'm going to try to lay out the reasons why and kind of back up some proof to support my point here for a moment. One of the reasons why we can say with certainty that Kirby Smart is not going to be scared of the upcoming SEC schedules that Georgia's about to have to play is because most of these teams, and our buddy Connor Riley wrote about this at DawgNation.com this morning, most of these teams, Georgia was already playing in the non-conference anyway. They were going to Norman in 2023, had a comeback game a few years after that, going to Austin, Texas to play Texas. This was on top of the SEC schedule that Georgia was already playing, so we kind of know that everything was sort of fine and good with Georgia when it comes to playing these tough games. Here's the other thing that we know. And when you look at the seasoning open game against Clemson, this is kind of a one-off deal. There are some other scheduled games between Georgia and Clemson in the future, but this is one of those things that a couple of years ago, the powers that be at both schools and in Charlotte there with the folks who kind of run the stuff for the stadium there said, hey, what if we got these two teams together? And Georgia would have had every right, and frankly to a certain extent Clemson would have too, but Georgia would have had every right to say, no, we're already playing an SEC schedule. We don't need a week one game against Clemson. We'll just go out and play somebody else. And, there was no obvious obligation to play this game, but Kirby Smart leapt at the chance to do so. And he has spent a good portion of the offseason talking about why. Let me go back to Paul Feinbaum's show from a month or so ago when Kirby made a visit there, making it very clear that the Clemson game is something that he very much enjoys, and the mindset that you take into Clemson obviously also translates to the mindset you might take for the new look SEC here as well. This is Kirby Smart.
It's a rivalry game, and you go poll your fan base, which is really the most important thing, and you look at your alumni base and you look at your financial supporters, you're saying, what do you guys want? And to a T, they want to see these kind of games. You know, the one benefit we found last year was playing the conference games only. That was so important to the fans. They love those games. And to go out and get a Clemson, which, you know, most of our financial supporters and our alumni base, that's a game they grew up watching. They want that game. They want that game year in and year out. And that's probably the same way for Clemson. I think Dabo would tell you the same thing. It's a great opportunity to go out and play a really good program and open your season that way.
So obviously the Clemson part of that, the specific, history with Georgia matters. But the fact that Kirby Smart acknowledges that our fans want these kinds of games, not just regional rivals against, teams that I grew up watching Georgia play, but teams who are good enough to beat you. I mean, can we just say this? Does it need to be said? I'll say it out loud anyway. That a win is more valuable when it comes against a team that could beat you, right? I mean, can we all agree with that? That not all wins in college football are created equal. When you're playing a team that can go out there and beat you, if you get a win in that game, that win kind of means a little bit more, and that's kind of the subtext what Kirby Smart's saying there. Our fans want to see us play a game where something's at stake, acknowledging that he thought that the all SEC schedule from a year ago is actually a good thing and a step forward for the sport. And so that to me is a mindset that would serve Smart well in the upcoming 16-team version of the SEC we're about to have. And by the way, Smart talked more about that game against Clemson at SEC Media Days last week. Once again, a very strong reminder of how Smart is also likely to approach the upcoming 16-team SEC once it finally does become official, Kirby again.
I think the first game can be what you want it to be. You can use it as a springboard. You can use it as a learning experience. The outcome's probably going to dictate how you use that game, but neither team will be in the playoffs or out of the playoffs based on the outcome of the game. It's a lot more important what you do and how you manage the success from that game or the failure from that game.
So I think that's interesting that Smart says, listen, you're going to have to move on from this game, whether it's win or a loss. And in a year like 2021, I think that Georgia-Clemson game has a good deal of importance for the program. But in the future of the SEC, once you go to 16 teams there, it's going to be a little bit more like the NFL, right? Where, they play longer schedules than college does, but, every NFL team, including most Super Bowl champions, except the 72 Dolphins, suffer losses at some point in time. And the best teams have to figure out a way to bounce back from those losses. In the SEC in the future, and this is going to be the kind of thing that those of us who are fans or media that talks about this or whatever else, we're all going to have to recalibrate our mindset after that of, in a league like this, where it's very possible that Alabama and Auburn are now in the SEC East, and the SEC West includes LSU and Texas A&M and Oklahoma and Texas, that everybody's going to be losing games. Nobody's going undefeated, likely, in a schedule like that, and how you bounce back from that really matters, and that's one of the things that, even though I'm not really for the 16-team SEC, at least could make it interesting, the ways in which teams are challenged in a way they haven't really been before. And I'll say one more point about this, and I'll move on to something different. If you think about this for a moment, there was some chatter not too long ago about, hey, maybe Texas will just go independent. And sometimes I think about that from the Georgia standpoint of, not that I would ever want Georgia to, but if Georgia really wanted to be an independent team, not playing the SEC, they've got enough cachet to probably do it. Proximity to Atlanta, gigantic fan base. Georgia's already a pretty big state. Certainly, east of the Mississippi, one of the bigger geographic states you have. And, Georgia's kind of got a lot going for it that if it really wanted to take a spin and see what kind of market there was for its own independence, you could probably do that. And Notre Dame has made the college football playoff twice. Last year, I guess, was an ACC team, but, in 2018, they make the playoff as an independent team there as well. When you can pick your own schedule, all of a sudden it's a lot easier to win some of those games that you play. But here's the thing I'm fairly confident in assuming, that even if Georgia could do that, even if, Georgia had the ability to do that, I don't think Georgia fans would want to. I don't think Georgia fans would want to exit the SEC, play the kind of independent-style schedule a Notre Dame plays, make the college football playoff because of that, and then proclaim some sort of hollow victory on the basis of the schedule that you played. I think if you poll Georgia fans to a man or to a woman, I think for the most part they would say, we want the grind. We want to go in the SEC. We want to run that gauntlet and come out on the other side. And the good news is I think Georgia fans have a coach that reflects that same feeling, which is, I think, an important thing to remember. Let me shift gears and talk about something different now for a moment. Today could be the day that the SEC, probably likely will be, the day the SEC gives full approval to Texas and Oklahoma joining the league, Texas A&M included, now kind of on board with this, which a lot of folks kind of assumed they eventually would be. And as I said earlier this week, as fascinating as this news is, rapid change, massive change coming to the SEC, it's actually pretty fascinating to me how quickly very respected voices have now moved on to the next thing, whatever the next thing's going to be, assuming that Texas and Oklahoma, as much of a seismic shift as it is for college athletics, college football in particular, is only the first of a series of moves that are about to come. Let me give you an example of this from a guy that you like, and I like as well. Former Georgia great David Pollack, now an analyst for ESPN, obviously one of the pivotal members of the College Game Day crew, but was on College Football Live this week saying that when he looks at what's next for the SEC, he sees a team out there that makes a lot of sense for the league, and maybe this team, a lot of sense for the SEC there as well. This is very interesting from Pollack from ESPN this week. Take a listen to this.
ACC, what do? You're not in a position of power. You don't have a huge league that's everybody's looking to get a bunch of members of. So I think that ACC, it's like, Clemson, please don't leave me, bro. Like, stay as long as you can, and then maybe bring a spot for me if I need to. But I don't see how, Rod, it doesn't make the most sense for them to plug into the SEC. They're right there in the South, Rod. They're right there in the powerhouse. They're recruiting just fine against everybody else. My God, it seems to make a lot of sense that Clemson would join the SEC.
So the Rod that Pollack is talking to there is Rod Gilmore, another ESPN analyst. And the point that I made yesterday afternoon on SEC Country Live about that audio clip is, this is the way that people have talked at tailgates forever. If you're sitting at the bar in a sports, joint watching the game, this is the way that college football fans in the comfort of their own homes or tailgates or living rooms or bars, wherever else, this is the way that folks talk about college football. Pie is the sky, recreate the sport however you want to. How would you choose to do it? Isn't it amazing that the conversation on television now by the most respected voices in the sport essentially is the same way? That there's no speculation that isn't so ludicrous and it can't at least be considered? And if you don't believe me on this, listen to the subject of what David Pollack was just addressing. The Clemson program, the lead man there, Dabo Swinney, he was encountered by some reporters here this week doing, I guess, one of those like rubber chicken type deals. And in the midst of taking some questions from reporters, acknowledged that he also sees big change coming. Now, he didn't outright say that Clemson's going to the SEC eventually, but the idea that Texas and Oklahoma to this league isn't the last step in all this, that's something that Dabo seems to believe there as well. Here's Dabo Swinney.
This is the first dominoes are falling. I think ultimately, the more expansion you have, the more you're going to have super conferences, and probably somewhere down the road. I don't know when it is. Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? But there probably will be some type of, 40, 50, 60 team league that kind of has, their own commissioner or whatever, and 12, 16 team playoff. I don't know. That's probably ultimately where it's going, but right now it's just all about trying to get ready for Georgia, September 4th. I got my hands full.
This is certainly very interesting times in which we live. Dabo says, I've got a lot to worry about right now when it comes to Clemson, and playing Georgia in week 1, but openly speculating about huge evolution of the sport still to come. David Pollack mentioning Clemson by name as the kind of team that might eventually be attracted into the SEC in the aftermath of what Texas and Oklahoma are about to do, which could another step taken on that here today. What a fascinating time to be in college football. I don't love it all. I'm worried about much of it. But as a person that's entertained by this sport, I have to admit that the way this is playing out right now is actually pretty entertaining. And I'm, like most of you, very curious to see what happens next. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Hello to you, and thanks for being with us, no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, right there on the page of DawgNation.com there as well. Top of the page, you can watch the show each and every day. That has been a great success thus far. We appreciate you making it so. Of course, we appreciate our friends at Merriweather and Tharp for making it all possible. Your source for Georgia divorce, they're the ones who bring the show to you here today. And really, I love telling their story because I think when people find themselves in the midst of challenging circumstances, the thing that makes challenging circumstances worse is a sense of loneliness, a sense of, well, I may be going through this on my own. There may not be anyone to help support me through all of this. And the divorce process can certainly be one of those events that could potentially leave you feeling that way. We all understand that, right? And in an audience the size of ours, some of you, unfortunately, are faced with dealing with it maybe even right now. So that's why I love telling people about Merriweather and Tharp, because they can help cure that feeling of loneliness. They can help cure that feeling of powerlessness, that you have no way to navigate this situation, because they've been through this thousands of times before. It may be your first time to go through this, but they've been through this thousands of times. And yes, certain things about your situation are specific to you, and I understand that, but the intricacies of the law and how they've applied in the past can certainly be help you make sense of your situation there as well. So I can't tell you enough to check them out. Decide for yourself. Find out if what I'm saying truly is true. You can find them online, theatlantadivorceteam.com. You can see all the free resources they have there. You can set up that free initial consultation. Then after that, you can make the decision to put Merriweather and Tharp to work for you. Your source for Georgia divorce. You find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com. They will take really good care of you. It's Terrence Edwards for us, coming up here in just a couple of minutes. Can't wait to talk to Terrence today. A lot to get into with him, including a couple of very strange situations happening around college football. Before that, though, I do want to go around the doghouse, presented today by our friends at Serve Pro. And I want to talk about ARIK Gilbert here for a moment, and I want to get more into this with Terrence Edwards coming up here in just a little bit, because obviously Terrence knows the pass-catching world of college football very well, and clearly he knows Gilbert's situation in particular. And obviously we know Gilbert, since he's come to Georgia, has kind of been treated like a wide receiver. He's, for the most part, I think on DawgNation, whether it be the written stories or here on our show, he's been called a wide receiver there as well. And I want to talk about that designation for Gilbert here for a moment. I apologize for not having the audio for you of this, but I am going to read you a quote. This is from Kirby Smart at SEC Media Days, and I believe this was from a private meeting that Smart had with some reporters prior to kind of the big appearance in the conference room and everything else. So this is what Smart says about Gilbert in that meeting. He says that he's a playmaker. He's a guy who you need to get the ball in his hands. He's worked out with the wide receiver group. That's where he indicated he wanted to work and train at. That's been a big part of what he wants to do. We've got to find out if he can sustain, which I think is a very interesting word. If he's got the stamina at that position to play the position, to play the X, to play the Z, which are just position designations for individual wide receiver spots, to play the slot. We'll find out ways we can move him around. When you have a coordinator like Coach Monken, that's what he does. When you're in the NFL, you've got guys all over. You've got Mike Evans over here. You've got people you've got to move around. We know ARIK Gilbert's going to be a big part of that. We also know that we've got other players in offense, and then he starts to mention tight ends. Darnell Washington, Brock Bowers, John Fitzpatrick, where we'll get some good tight end use. Where each guy goes, I don't think it's set right now. But we're going to find that out over the next 27 to 28 practices. Now, I think that's really interesting, and I'm hopeful that you do there as well. And the reason why I think that's pretty interesting is because I think what you hear there from Smart is at least the possibility remaining open that quite possibly maybe ARIK Gilbert still plays some tight end for Georgia this year. Now, I'm going to tell you, I certainly respect the idea that Gilbert wants to be a receiver, and I understand why he would. And certainly I think he's got the kind of capabilities, the dynamic skill set that would allow him to be successful there. But I still think the best of Gilbert probably, and this is just my best guess, my speculation, maybe I'm wrong, but this is my best guess here. I think the best of Gilbert probably still includes some play at the tight end position, some opportunity to line up there and take advantage, and what are huge mismatches, take advantage of that opportunity that position could present for himself. Because when you see some of the stuff that Darnell Washington did a year ago against Missouri, against Cincinnati, it was that kind of thing, right? And I'm not saying I want to take Washington off the field at the expense of ARIK Gilbert. I mean, there's obviously going to be some creative ways that maybe you can play all these guys together, to say nothing of John Fitzpatrick or, even someone like Rylan Godey, who's, I think, back healthy again, or, obviously Brock Bowers, who's a lot of folks are paying close attention to say nothing of those other guys. I still think in some form or fashion, Gilbert being used somehow, some way at the tight end spot, I still think that creates incredible value for Georgia. And I'm actually kind of curious to see if it does truly play itself out that way. Interesting stuff there. It's Around the Doghouse. It's presented by our friends at Serve Pro. And listen, what Serve Pro does is such an important thing. You have damage, right? Sometimes that damage in your home created by, fire or water intrusion or something like that. Well, listen, the restoration specialists at Serve Pro can help walk you through every step of this process to kind of get you back on your your feet and make your home literally like it never happened. So if water damage strikes, if fire damage strikes, call on ServPro. They can help you immediately, and they'll literally make it be like it never happened. So if you check out servpro.com, you can find out more about that. If you're listening radio and podcast, it's SERV, servpro.com, restoration specialists for you when you have some sort of damage to your home, probably caused by water or fire. That's what ServPro steps up and does for you today, and they can do that for you around the Doghouse, presented by ServPro here today. We have a lot of very interesting stories to cover before our show is done. I'm actually also going to give myself a little bit of credit for something. Maybe I gave some expert legal advice, believe it or not, on the show a few days ago. I'll give you more details on that before we're done. But for now, on everything around Georgia football and all the fun to come for the upcoming season and the wildness that we're living through with conference expansion, let's talk all of that with Terrence Edwards, the former great Georgia wide receiver, here right now on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
So I'll say hello to Terrence Edwards, and I'll bring him in on the conversation we were just having. And, Terrence, I won't pretend to be an expert on this like you are, and there's obviously a great chance my opinion is wrong, but I was reading a quote a moment ago from Kirby Smart and kind of the interesting ways in which a guy like ARIK Gilbert can be used. This is going back to last week at SEC Media Days, and Smart talks about the stamina needed to play one of those receiver positions full-time or whatever else. And what I've said is, and I'm hopeful that you'll tell me if I am wrong on this, what I've said is that I think the best value for Gilbert, because he's such a unique skill set, I wouldn't mind still seeing him play some tight end. I wouldn't mind still seeing him exploit some of those mismatches the way that Darnell Washington did in a couple of games, especially near the end of last year. I have no question that Gilbert's talented enough to be a wide receiver, but a guy talented enough to be a wide receiver, tearing things up for opposing defenses at the tight end spot, that seems like a pretty cool thing to me too. How about for someone like you who not only knows Gilbert, but just knows the game of pass catching very well? What do you think about the possibility that maybe Gilbert could still be a tight end from time to time?
I wouldn't mind it at all. Just long as he understands and the coaches understand that, his predominant role is going to be on the outside. But I think if you give him some opportunities to go down in the block and get some of those mixed matches in the box, as long as he's getting the ball and he knows he's not going to be there 100% of the time, I think he, as a player, would do anything to help the team. But his mindset is being a wide receiver playing on the outside.
I mean, when you think about some of the stuff that the Smart coaches seem to do, and whether it be on NFL Sundays, college football Saturdays, a lot of this is pre-snap, right? Whether it be motion or how you move guys around. And when Smart, talking about Gilbert last week, mentions a guy like Mike Evans, who obviously, formerly Texas A&M, now the Tampa Bay Bucks, and you think about how you kind of slide those guys around before the play even begins, obviously looking for that mismatch to exploit. I would imagine if you're ARIK Gilbert, something like that really kind of perks your ears up, because it is about more than just going to the same spot every single time and hopefully you outrun somebody or hopefully you outleap somebody and bring down a 50-50 ball. That a lot of what a good coach does, and Todd Monken I think is on his way to proving that for Georgia, a lot of what a good coach does is put you in a position to succeed before the ball is even snapped, right?
Right, most definitely. I think he gives a lot of versatility in your personnel grouping as well. So you don't have to bring another big body in to go down in the block. If ARIK is versed enough and have picked up the offense enough that he can go down in the box and block for the run game, then also line up on the outside when need be, I think that is a good thing, that you don't have to change so many players on any given drive. He can go into the box and block, and he can go outside and run routes like a pure wide receiver. So me personally, I would love to see him being able to be diverse in both ways and not just sticking himself at 240 pounds. I'm strictly a wide receiver. Let's be versatile and use your God-given ability on the outside and also on the inside.
You and I talked last week, right after we first heard about Texas and Oklahoma likely coming to the SEC. A lot has happened since then. It seems like this is on the fast track now. Sooner rather than later, they'll be in this league. In fact, the SEC could extend an invitation here on this Thursday when we're speaking right now. And Terrence, one of the things I've said on the show is I'm actually really fascinated by how quickly the conversation has also pivoted to what's next. Your former teammate David Pollack saying, what about Clemson? Maybe Clemson should go to the SEC. And you hear about other schools kind of kicked around there as well. Do you get the sense that all of this is kind of leading to a world in which maybe the SEC is looking to grab big-name teams even beyond Oklahoma and Texas, and it really does become almost a NFL-style version of college football with the very best, all underneath the SEC umbrella? Is that where we're heading with all of this?
I wouldn't. I hope not. I truly hope not. I think the conference play is one of those unique things to college football, and I just love the ACC, the SEC. I just love having these conferences because once you become a true professional, whatever league you play, man, there's bragging rights to it. One of my good friends that I coach with at Pace Academy, Justin Miller, is he's a former Clemson All-American, and we always have this banter going back and forth about Clemson and the ACC and what we perceive the ACC to be, and how I just don't feel like having one big conference is the way to go. I mean, college football, why I love college football is for all the traditions that we I don't want it to get to the NFL because that's not college football. And college football, in my mind, especially in the South, is king. I would take college football over any other sport. And I just want the traditions that have set for college football to stay.
And, think about your role there at Pace Academy, what you do with that great high school program in Atlanta. Pace is going to produce players like Andrew Thomas or Jamari Salyer, and they've got their eye on the SEC. They've got their eye on coming to a place like Georgia. But there are also going to be guys who come through a program like that or a lot of the other programs around the metro Atlanta area where just getting that Division I offer, that Power 5 level offer is the kind of thing they've really dreamed about. And I think it's a really good thing those opportunities have existed for those players. And I guess one of the things that concerns me a little bit, I'm not really quite sure what you do about this, but it does concern me, is as you see the powerful programs all align themselves together, what happens to the slightly less powerful programs who are, still, funding themselves in their own right and have kind of existed to be an opportunity for players at the high school level who just want to play Division I football, who have that college football dream, but without any kind of connection to the Oklahomas, the Texases? What happens to some of those programs who provided those Division I opportunities to a lot of players who use that as leverage, as a way of changing their life? That's one of the things I worry about here is, and this firsthand because of the guys that you work with, is that college football is a change agent for a lot of the players who are lucky enough to get a chance to go play and be a part of it. And, boy, I hope those same level of opportunities exist in the future, and I can't be sure that they will.
Right. There's a lot of changes, and those are the changes that I don't want to happen. Everyone, I've always preached to the kids that I train and to the parents, like, everyone is not going to a Power 5 school. Plenty of opportunities to go play football. That's Division I. So when this mega conference comes about, and if that happens, and to bring one conference in, I just don't see the good in college football for that. I just don't think college football has a unique format that we use right now that's been in existence since I can remember, and it has worked. Yes, we could tweak some stuff here and there, but just to make every team piling up in one conference to make a super conference. Yes, it's going to bring money. Yes, it's going to do all that. And at the end of the day, we all know it's about money for the people that's running these universities. But for the kid who's there, there's plenty of the kids that won't have opportunity to play in those. What about them? What about those type kids? So I just love college football, and I just love what college football represents. I just hope we don't lose sight of that.
So let me finish with this, and I'm honestly curious what you think about this, and I really have no way of predicting. I'm not sure you've seen the story, but Quinn Ewers is a terrific quarterback prospect out of the state of Texas on his way to Ohio State, and Yahoo reported yesterday that Ewers is strongly considering, in fact, he's in his family openly quoted in the story, saying they're strongly considering leaving the state of Texas, not participating in what would be his final year of high school football, to go to Columbus, enroll there early. He's going to be able to graduate, but he wouldn't participate in his senior year of high school, and he's going to start cashing in on his name, image, likeness opportunity because the Texas state law does not provide the chance to do that. Now, we should point out there have been guys that have skipped their senior season before, Jake Bentley, the former South Carolina quarterback, even, JT Daniels. So it's, reclassifying is not necessarily a new thing. Tony Grimes did that, I guess, last year there as well. But reclassifying for the purpose of taking advantage of name, image, likeness money is a little bit of a different kind of thing. What do you think about this, Terrence? Is this good for him for cashing in on his value, or bad for him for missing out on what for a lot of people is a pretty special thing. Not only a chance to play your high school senior season, but just go to prom and be a kid while you're still a teenager. Where do you come down on a guy like this, basically trading his high school experience for money?
I'm all for the making money off your name, image, likeness. In the world, of high school, probably the best time I've ever had in my football, my senior year in high school, to graduate, to win a state championship with the guys that I grew up with playing street football, pee-wee football, and just to give up that for money when I just couldn't do it myself. I had a heck of a time as a senior, finishing off my career, as people may know, back-to-back state champs, going 30-0 my last 2 years in high school as a starting quarterback myself, and I would not have given that in the world. I just enjoy it. I mean, it's a time to reflect, a time to enjoy your youth, because once you step on that campus now, you're considered a young adult, and now real life situations going to occur. Parents won't be there to get you up at 5:30 to go do that morning run. So I just think we're rushing. Kids are rushing to get that money that they are looking for. But as a senior year in high school, that was the best time of my life, and I would not give that up for nothing.
Terrence, I think that's a strong statement. I'm glad to have you make it here on this show. Really appreciate that. And that's the kind of passion you bring to the young men that you're working with on a regular basis there as well. Obviously, your personal coaching skills available to anybody who wants to be a better receiver, just a better pass catcher all the way around. So for someone who wants to find out more about that, how can they get in touch with you?
All social media platforms at Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy.
Terrence, great stuff. Thanks for your time. Look forward to speaking to you soon.
Thank you.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
I think this is really fascinating, and we'll talk more about it in a moment. Before that, I want to remind you about my friends at the Finish Long Drink, and so many of you have been saying, yeah, BA, you're right. I'm actually really enjoying this, and it's a great time to talk Finish Long Drink, because if you don't know the backstory of the Finish Long Drink, it actually started in Finland. That's why it's called the Finish Long Drink. It actually started in Finland, going back to like the 1950s when the summer games were in Helsinki. So we've got, summer games going on right now. So kind of a nice tie-in related to all of that. But that's the way it first got started, as a celebration of all the fun that folks were having there in Finland because of that. And it's actually been in the United States, I want to say since 2018, I think it came over to like New York City. And, now it's all around the state of Georgia. And there are 4 different varieties that you can choose from. The Long Drink Strong, a lot of you like that. It's the black can. I get a lot of pictures from y'all enjoying that Long Drink Strong in the black can. 8.5% alcohol by volume. The Long Drink Cranberry, which I know has been super popular. Other bars are in Athens can't keep that in stock. They're just selling so much of that. A lot of students really enjoy that. A lot of young folks kind of like that. I like the Long Drink Original, the traditional, the one that's in like the blue can. And if you're saying, well, what is it, BA? It kind of looks like a beer, but it's not a beer. This is a ready-to-drink cocktail that comes right out of the can. You can pop the top, drink it. You can pour it into a glass, whatever else. But there's no mixing. There's no work. There's no effort. It's just something enjoyable. Kind of a citrus soda with a gin kick. It's great. I mean, it's really, really enjoyable, especially this time of year. I mean, it's like 100 degrees out there today. You better believe a nice, cold, refreshing cocktail is great. So check out thelongdrink.com, and you can have yourself a good time here as we head towards the start of the season. As we head towards Dog Nation Invasion, by the way, you better believe the Long Drink going to be a big part of that there as well. So a moment ago, I'm talking to Terrence Edwards about Quinn Ewers, the Texas quarterback on his way to Ohio State. It's very interesting to hear Terrence's strong statement on that. And I have to say, I very much agree with this there as well. And, Pete Thamel writes this for Yahoo Sports, and the basic gist of the story is that Texas won't allow high school players to cash in on name, image, likeness revenue. So Ewers going to leave his school, and it's like, one of the bigger schools, in Texas, like one of the power programs there. So this is a pretty big deal for him to leave that program to go on, but he wants to cash in on his name, image, and likeness. And what Thamel writes is that Ewers has a chance to make upwards of $1 million. And there's no verifiable proof whatsoever that amount is accurate. The same thing with the Bryce Young thing the other day. And that's one of the things that kind of frustrates me about, and listen, I'm not trying to be like I'm clearly not a journalist. That's not my background. That's not what I do. But as a consumer of news, just what drives me crazy. When a guy like Thamel writes a story like this, it isn't exclusive. He's the only one who had it. And it almost seems like the trade-off for getting the story is to treat the details of the story with like absolutely zero skepticism. Otherwise, if you showed any skepticism whatsoever, it's like you don't get the exclusive to do the story, which kind of frustrates me a little bit. Like the only company that gets mentioned in this story as being willing to pay viewers anything whatsoever is like this, I don't even know. It's like a probiotic or energy drink type thing, whatever else. I looked them up online. They have fewer social media followers than I do. So that company's not paying Quinn Ewers $1 million. They don't have $1 million to toss around here. And as far as getting some sort of equity stake in the company, if that's based on some sort of Mickey Mouse, valuation here, then I think that's pretty specious in and of itself. And I'm glad to hear Terrence said what he said a minute ago, that I am totally against the idea of a high school kid, thinking more about name, image, likeness than he's thinking about his own senior season. And listen, that's not to say I'm not free market or anything like that. I mean, the fact of the matter is I just see people as more than just a vessel for their economic potential. And you better believe, as a father of children, I wouldn't sell one of my years to be the leading influence in my child's life for $1 million. I just wouldn't do it. And I don't think Quinn Ewers is getting $1 million, but even if he was, it wouldn't be worth it to me to sell one of those years to somebody else, to have him not living or her not living under my roof anymore, to go live somewhere else. I just think the formative years of a child, which is what Ewers still is, I just think the formative years of a child are truly that important. Just simply, would not do it. And so maybe this is the direction we're going. But man, and by the way, to say nothing of the fact that the 1 year you're trading here is the senior year. As Terrence said, it was the most enjoyable thing he ever did, winning a state championship, just going to prom, being a kid before you have to be, someone who's on a much bigger platform, much bigger stage. I just think the whole thing is really weird. And obviously Ewers wouldn't be the first guy to reclassify. That's happened a lot more. But it sounds like Ewers wouldn't even be considering that kind of reclassification, because the truth is Ohio State's already really deep at quarterback. It sounds like Ewers wouldn't even be considering that reclassification if it wasn't for that chance to cash in on name, image, likeness that he says, or somebody says, is going to be 7 figures. A, that figure I believe is erroneous. I don't think that's going to end up being true. And B, if Ewers makes this decision, I think he's eventually going to regret it. There are just some things in life worth more than money. This is an example of that, especially for a family that by their own admission doesn't really need the money. They have said that in that same story with Yahoo Sports. But that is the world that we kind of live in here today. A couple other things here real quick. I saw this very interesting from Ed Orgeron yesterday, who basically is like speaking at a Booster Club event. And he's essentially challenging his boosters to go out and pay LSU players. Like really just kind of, very aggressively saying, hey, you guys have been wanting to do this forever. The time is now to go out there and do that. It is really interesting how aggressive, I would say, that LSU in particular is trying to be with name, image, and likeness. Now, how well it's going to work, I'm not quite so sure. One difference between LSU and, say, for Georgia, for instance, is, Georgia's not allowing its players to use the trademark UGA logos in any of their advertisements, where LSU has said it's okay to do that. I don't care. Georgia's not backing off that stance. Most college programs won't, but that is something that LSU's kind of, willing to do right there. And, in this particular case, basically deputizing the boosters to go out and find some money for the players. It's the kind of thing you'd almost expect Ed Orgeron to say. And in this case, he's very much on brand with how he's, saying what he's saying there. These are fascinating times, and Ed Orgeron is maybe the latest example of that. All right, we'll kind of make that your SEC through for a moment. I want to talk more about this SEC expansion thing. I'll also remind you that coming up in a couple of minutes before we wrap things up, we'll have our latest Kroger 5-Star Kid winner to give away here. We've got a big announcement coming up on that here in just a moment. Can't wait to be able to do that. Before that, though, there is new developments in the it's now beyond likely expansion of Texas and Oklahoma. It's just as of yet being waited to become a formality. Obviously, Texas and Oklahoma have notified the Big 12 they are leaving. The SEC expected today to extend that invitation to them, and then the dominoes are going to keep falling after that. But yesterday was a very interesting day for the league that the Big 12, that Oklahoma and Texas are leaving, the Big 12. And you saw Bob Bowlesby, the league commissioner, come out swinging against ESPN, accusing ESPN of trying to essentially poach other teams besides Texas and Oklahoma from the Big 12, push them into the American Athletic Conference, and basically dissolve the Big 12 as a way of, almost eliminating any kind of, like rights fee obligation or buyout fee obligation or, whatever else. I mean, Bowlesby was as accusatory of ESPN as you could possibly ever be. Now, I'm going to give myself a little bit of credit here for a moment, because a week ago, I gave some fairly half-baked legal opinion here on this show. As it turns out, I may have been 100% accurate what I said, even though I had zero idea of what I was talking about. Let me give you a taste. This is from exactly a week ago on Thursday's show. Now, I want you to listen to this here very quickly for a moment. Again, yes, I'm being a little bit of a blowhard by patting myself on the back for this. I totally acknowledge that. But listen to like the very specific, like Latin type sounding phrase I use. I sound very smart with what I'm about to say here, and I got to give myself a little bit of credit. Here is me and my expert legal advice from exactly 1 week ago. Listen to this. The movie The Insider about the whistleblower for the tobacco company that goes on 60 Minutes, and there was all this fear that the tobacco companies were going to sue 60 Minutes, and the concept of tortious interference came up about, interfering with what is a, signed contract. There's, I guess, also a little bit of concern here that, listen, if you get in there and start messing too much with all of this and cause these teams to leave the Big 12 and kind of invalidating a contract that was in place, there's some potential legal ramifications for all that. I mean, listen, how smart does that guy sound? Tortious interference? That's very Latin-like. I mean, that's what you would pay Jeffrey Toobin to do on CNN. By the way, I'm also better behaved on Zoom calls as well. I'm giving you Toobin-level legalese type jargon there. Well, lo and behold, I want to read this tweet from you. This is Ross Dellinger, respected reporter yesterday, on the Bob Bowlesby quote. Bowlesby, of course, the Big 12 commissioner. This is Ross Dellinger on Twitter. He says, Big 12 Commissioner Bob Bowlesby tells Sports Illustrated that he has documented evidence that ESPN tried to encourage an unnamed conference to add Big 12 members in an effort to destabilize the league so Texas and Oklahoma could avoid exit fees. Bob Bowlesby says it's tortious interference. This is amazing, and I should get credit for this, although I won't. On the basis of a movie that I first saw 20 years ago, in which this was a plot point, I said, well, it's probably going to end up being tortious interference for the SEC or for ESPN, and that's exactly what Bob Bowlesby is claiming. I have no idea, if this is going to go anywhere or not, but at least give me a little bit of credit for, I'm going to use air quotes here, a little bit of expert media advice. I mean, Connor, I got to get a little credit for this, right?
Congrats. You use the same sort of legal thinking as the guy who's getting his conference rated for his best teams.
But still, I mean, I feel like my level of punditry has just gone up, right? I mean, it's I could be a cable TV talking head with that kind of expert advice.
So is ESPN or local radio stations trying to book you as legal expert on conference realignment?
Actually, that's a really good point. So I know we have a lot of, media type moguls who listen to watch this show. If you want me to make an appearance, in fact, I won't even give you the full going rate on my name, image, and likeness. Call me a legal expert. I'll come on there and I'll explain how all of this is going to play out next. So, as I said before, I fully acknowledge that's a little blowhardy, but I got to give myself a little bit of credit because in this particular case, I fairly well got this one on the head. All right, real quickly before we get ready to wrap up here today, let me also give a shout out to our Kroger 5-star kid winner. Such a great thing we've been able to do. Kroger obviously stepping up in a huge way to support these kids. We're celebrating them. How about a great win today for Barrett CRIDER on being chosen as our 5-star kid winner today. Adopted at birth, born with fetal alcohol syndrome disorder, and this is obviously an amazing thing to overcome. Of course, permanent brain damage can be caused for that, but that hasn't slowed Barrett down one bit. Very likable kid. Parents describe him as sweet to everybody. Also, Barrett, very fast runner there as well. You see the medal hanging around his neck there. He placed in the long jump, 100-meter, 200-meter at his events, and he's going to be going to Jacksonville very soon to represent his team there at Nationals. So that's incredible. We wish Barrett the best of luck on that. We certainly congratulate Barrett today for being our Kroger 5-star kid winner. Incredible, incredible news there. Great package of gift cards on the way to him, and we've got another winner to give tomorrow. Huge thanks to Kroger for making all of that possible. All right, as we wrap up the show today, our Gatorade roll call, and of course we give out a golden shoe winner. And the one thing that my bias is well established on is, in addition to Gatorade and everything else, this is sort of like the bias inception, the bias within the bias. That not only we love celebrating Gator hating around here, we also like people who use Star Wars memes for their golden shoe submissions. That typically gets you to the front of the line here because we are big Star Wars fans around here. I liked this one. Pretty funny stuff from Daniel Jones. who kind of gives you an Anakin Skywalker thing from Star Wars saying, Texas, Oklahoma shouldn't join the SEC. We aren't geographically located in the Big 12. But then you've got Palpatine saying, SEC, do it. And then Anakin strikes down Count Dooku with the lightsaber there. Pretty good stuff all the way around from Daniel Jones. Very clever. Good Golden Shoe winner for today. How about our Gator Hater countdown? Just 93 days from right now. That number doesn't seem so big anymore. Getting closer. We'll see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp. And on video. Time now for our S. Andrews cool down. I'll ask you to refer to me as B.A. Esquire from now on. That's my new designation. I told my son yesterday I want to be referred to as Supreme Leader around the house. I actually think from now on I just want to be B.A. Esquire. I think that's my new designation that I would prefer on that. Obviously, I kid. Let's get a few comments. We'll bounce out pretty quickly after that. I got a fun thing we're doing today. I can't wait to tell you more about that later on. But for now, let's just get some of your comments over here on Facebook here for a moment. Joseph Kennedy says the most annoying coaches are Mullen, Dabo, and Coach O. So I understand where you're coming from on that. I don't dislike Dabo Swinney as much as anybody else does. Now, I'll go kayfabe by the time we get to the Georgia Clemson week, and I'll certainly, be, getting into that there at the time. But Dabo's one of those guys that I've never hated him as bad as everybody else does. Not to say that I love him. I just think that Dabo gets a little bit of a bad rap, and I don't have the genuine distaste for him you seem to have. Orgeron's kind of the same way. At one point in time, I kind of laughed at Orgeron, thought it was a cartoon character. I don't really think that quite as much as I used to. I think that he's got some need to kind of button up certain things with the LSU program, but I actually don't mind Orgeron so bad. Mullen, obviously, we're in agreement on that, but there are a lot of coaches that I find a lot more annoying than those two. Jonathan Moore says we should just be called the Southern Conference now, as opposed to the SEC with its kind of southeastern, bent to it. Yeah, the Southern Conference, that's still an FCS league, right? And I know Georgia Southern used to be in the Southern Conference. Is Furman still there? Furman, I think, maybe a Southern Conference type team. And, of course, it's obviously a Division I basketball tournament there as well. Randy Hall says, B.A. Esquire, what's the projected date of the studio makeover? It's not going to be during the season. It's going to be – it's not going to be before the season. It's going to be sometime during the season. And that's about all I know about that right now. Matt Rukavina says, I got massive props for the PG-13 Tubin reference. Yeah, I'm a little bit of a news junkie. I don't talk about a lot of that stuff on this show because all y'all really want to talk about is Georgia football. But one of my sort of best and worst traits is I'm a little bit of a news junkie. CJ Steele asked a great question. By the way, CJ Steele is also a great name as well. CJ Steele says, if we use him enough, can Cook be the difference maker we need with Pickens out? I think that's a really great question. And I'll be totally honest with you. If you look at the history of James Cook at Georgia, and you go back and listen to a show like this, year one, year two, I took a lot of grief from time to time because I don't want to say I was down on James Cook because I don't really think I'm really down on anybody, but
you were sleeping on James Cook. You always were.
So that's kind of the criticism I got. And that used to be a very hot topic that people just didn't think I was giving enough credit. And at the time, what I was saying about that, CJ, is that I just wasn't sure how Georgia was going to use him. And it's kind of like that thing of it's great to be versatile and it's great to have all those different ways you can use people. That's kind of like Oklahoma has a lot of guys like that. Eric Gray's a running back, but you can also use him this way. Or, James Cook sort of feels like the kind of player that Oklahoma seems to have a lot of in most years. But at a certain point in time, at a place like Georgia, you've got to really identify how you're going to be used. It's one thing to be a running back that could be a wide receiver or a wide receiver that could be a running back. But at a certain point in time, you just got to decide what you are, and this is the way we're going to use you and get the most out of you. And I just didn't quite see that happening at Georgia necessarily. And then last year, before last season, I think I kind of came around on Cook a lot more. And if you go back and listen to this portion of the show from this time a year ago, I was really kind of talking up Cook as one of my potential breakout type players. And unfortunately, and this is not a knock on James, but unfortunately, it just sort of seems like he was still in that mold of, well, is he a pass-catching running back or is he a running back that should just move to wide receiver? And I think to a degree, we still don't know. Obviously, you and I both, CJ, and everybody else listening, we like guys who catch 85-yard touchdowns against Alabama. Well, that's a guy that you want. That's a guy that you want on your roster and you want to do good things with him. That's what James Cook is capable of doing. He did that a year ago. But how do you turn that into something that happens with a little more consistency? And I still just don't know. So I think you bring up a great point, is that if you're looking for someone who could be exploited by a smart coach like Todd Monken, clearly James Cook is one of those guys. But would I rank him as highly as I would rank guys who are a little more firmly defined within a position category? For instance, do I think that James Cook's going to have a better year than Darnell Washington? If I had to guess, I'd probably say no, that Washington is a guy who clearly has a way in which he's going to be used, and I think that fit for him, I would say, gives him a better statistical outlook. Connor?
I would just follow up. Darnell Washington only had 7 catches a season ago.
Mm-hmm.
James Cook averaged 7 touches per game, and I imagine that might even go up a little bit more this season.
Totally understand. That's still my pick, though, because I think you have to weight what Washington did at the end of the year more heavily than you have to weight, what may have happened at the beginning of the year. Because the truth is, go back to this time a year ago on Darnell Washington, I was singing a very different tune. I thought that Washington, as good-looking as he was, a little bit of a project, a little bit of that kind of guy who was going to have to learn that college game, because unlike a guy like ARIK Gilbert that was playing essentially at a small college team at Marietta High School, coming out of Nevada, that's not quite maybe what Darnell Washington had. And he actually matured on the field much quicker than I almost assumed that he would. I thought last year might be a little bit of just a get-up-to-speed type year for Darnell. But by the Missouri game, he was a real weapon. And I'm not going to tell you that. I'm not overselling this and saying, and you better believe he's going to be the Mackey Award winner or anything like that. Although, by the way, speaking of the Mackey Award, I should have mentioned this during the regular show when I was making my case for Gilbert as a tight end. He was on the Mackey watch list, I believe, right? So, now, listen, watch lists don't really mean anything because everyone's eligible for the award, whether they're on the watch list or not. But that would have certainly bolstered my point about him being used as a tight end, that even the Mackey Award folks kind of still see him that way. The point is this, going back to James Cook, is that if you say he ought to be considered as a breakout player, absolutely I believe that's the case. But on a team in which we know that not everyone can have their top-end statistical performance, I believe my chips might go on a different spot on the roulette wheel if I was making my own bet, if you understand what I'm saying on that. I think it's a great comment, though. Let's see what else. Joel Moody says Cook needs 10 touches if that's possible with all of our weapons. He's explosive play waiting to happen. And I have all the respect in the world for someone like Joel here or the commenter a moment ago who you say, hey, I want Cook to get those 10 touches at the expense of whoever else might be getting them. As CJ said a moment ago, Pickens, after all, is hurt. That's a few touches that are up for grabs now. And if you're the kind of person who says, I believe in James Cook, whether it's throwing the ball, additional carries, two-back set type stuff, I like James Cook enough that I want Cook to get those additional carries. Connor said he was getting about 7 per game a year ago, going up to about 10 per game. If that's the case you want to make, that's a reasonable point of view. I guess if I'm distributing the carries and the touches and all the potential targets, I might distribute them a slightly different way, but I totally respect that opinion. Lindsey Bryan says Texas is back for the 9th time in 5 years. Yeah, that's certainly seems that way. I mean, I don't know of a program, maybe other than with the exception of Notre Dame, maybe Duke basketball a little bit too, that has more very vocal detractors and does more to justify the level of hatred that it gets. I mean, Texas is just really easy to hate. Plus, the whole state to me is just like too drama-filled, right? It's like what state would produce a quarterback, leaving his senior year to go cash in on NIL money from some energy drink company that barely has any kind of social media presence? I mean, that's clearly coming from the state of Texas. There's just too much drama in that state. The motto for the city of Austin, where Texas is located, is "Keep Austin Weird." I think that's part of the problem. Is like I sort of like the non-weird version of the SEC we have now, and I'm not looking to bring too much weirdness into the league. A lot of those Texas people are just weird. No offense to Matt Rukavina, but a lot of those Texas people are just weird. Miriam Martin Corbin says she truly, truly hates Texas. Lindsey Bryan also says that Texas is the Ohio State of the South, which is a pretty good comparison. Let me also say this, and this is my crackpot conspiracy that only 10 of you will even know what I'm talking about. There have been a couple of Texas homer callers to the Feinbaum show here this week, and they've gotten some social media play and things like that. I'm fairly certain those are plant calls. That's my conspiracy theory. I have no way of proving that. A plant call is morning radio shows do this all the time. Like a lot of the people who call morning radio shows and are like, oh, this crazy thing happened to me on my date last night. I need your help to figure all this out. The secret is that this kind of stuff goes on around the country. A lot of times those are plant phone calls. I'm fairly certain that the pro-Texas callers to the Feinbaum show the last couple of days of Texas is about to take this league over. I'm fairly certain those may be plant calls designed to rustle up some anger amongst the rest of the SEC folks. Can't prove that, but I have my reasons for thinking that. Let me go over to YouTube here for a moment. We'll take a few comments over here on the YouTube side of things. HR Picking Stuff says Texas is dangerous. They will beat you. Clemson John says, why is Texas so anxious to go 6-6 every season? I did see this line from Spurrier, and I thought it was funny. He said that they're coming to the SEC because they can't win the Big 12 as it is. Spurrier's still in his 70s, and he's still tossing those zingers out there, man. How about this? Jeremy knows Kiori Howard, who won our Kroger 5-star kid from yesterday, saying that Kiori was super excited about being the Kroger 5-star kid you guys made her day. That is awesome to hear. I tell you, I love doing these contests. I like honoring the moms, which we did back in May. Love hearing about the 5-star kids here. I mean, I think this time of year is such a great time to celebrate all of that. It's a big week for us. We're kind of going back to school around my family, at least getting ready to. And, it's just such an important time. And, obviously a lot of challenges associated with last year for a lot of people and really the last couple of years. Everybody's got this mindset towards this being a much better school year. And so we got so many kids, Kiori included, around the city of Atlanta, state of Georgia, just doing such great things. And I just love the chance to be able to celebrate that. So, Jeremy, I'm happy to have you tell us that. And I would please ask you to pass on to Kiori just how proud of her we are for all the great things that she's doing. Jeremy says that's his daughter. That's awesome, Jeremy. Man, that really makes me happy to hear that. JC also writes in and says, does it not make any sense at all for Oklahoma to come to the SEC? They have no problem recruiting right now and make the playoffs a lot. So he says it does not make any sense for Oklahoma to come to the SEC. Here's the problem. I think that, like when you were a kid, your parents told you to be careful who your friends are. I think that's kind of what Oklahoma and Texas are seeing. That Oklahoma is a big enough program that they're going to be able to, for the most part, thrive no matter what. And Oklahoma is successful enough. I mean, their recruiting has actually really gotten – for a while there, they were not really recruiting at what I would call a super elite level. That's starting to change. They're I would say, certainly recruiting at a higher clip than they were even a few years ago. And they're fixture in the college football playoff. But I think before what Oklahoma and Texas have seen is we have to be careful who our friends are because, look, we're about to see a big shifting around when it comes to all these conference realignments. And it is generally thought that Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Iowa State, Texas Tech will have no offers to go anywhere. Like the Pac-12 doesn't want them. The Big Ten certainly does not want them. The ACC probably doesn't want them either. Like the only teams in the Big 12 that probably have any value to other leagues, TCU is rumored to have some value to the Pac-12 because TCU, while it's a smallish school, it's in Fort Worth, Texas, Amon G. Carter Stadium right there in Fort Worth, Texas, obviously a big metropolitan area. The Big 12 might like to get their hands on that. There's been some chatter that I don't think it's probably the Big Ten, but a program like Kansas, believe it or not, might have some value to somebody more so than some of the other schools in that league do. But for the most part, if it's not the Big 12 for the rest of these teams in the Big 12, it's like American Athletic Conference. I mean, they're falling out of what we currently think of as a Power 5 type level. And so to go back to your point, this is ultimately why I think Oklahoma knows it needs to come to the SEC. Because if no other conferences would want the teams we're in a conference with, then do we really want to be in this conference? And that's kind of ultimately what it's come down to. Now, I've said before, I love the passion that exists for Iowa State sports. I mean, I'm a big college sports fan. You watch their games in a non-COVID time in basketball, that gym is always full, and it is loud. I mean, think about when, Fred Hoiberg was there and some of that kind of stuff. Always super loud, super intense. It's just small. The football thing the same way. A lot of fans, or I should say a lot of intensity among the fans. No problem selling tickets for a relatively small, Ames, Iowa Stadium, but it's not big. It's not lucrative the way that the Texas and Oklahoma's would be. And so, therefore, it's the kind of thing that Texas and Oklahoma don't want to be associated with anymore. And, Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, kind of very much the same way. I learned this when Georgia went to Oklahoma State in 2009, that I don't know if that's changed since then. 2009 is kind of a long time ago. But at the time, Oklahoma State had never had a sellout. I thought that was kind of fascinating. It's not the biggest stadium in the world, but it's, college-size stadium. And when Georgia was going there in Stillwater in 2009, just in looking at something, I just remember reading that they had never had a sellout before. They're just not a big, it's just not a big fan base. Oklahoma's not a hugely populous state. And obviously, Oklahoma is the biggest deal in the state. Oklahoma State kind of gets what's left over, and that's just not enough to be gigantic. And Texas and Oklahoma are worried about that association right now, that the other schools in the Big 12 just don't bring enough dowry to the table to be worth the trouble. At least that's the sense that you get. One or two more. Davis Painter said, would you guess 2022 or 2025 for the SEC schedule for Oklahoma and Texas? If you're going to give me only those two choices, I'd say that 2022 is far more likely than 2025. I've always felt like the idea that Texas and Oklahoma would stay until 2025, even though they have been very careful to say it that way every step of the process, is all about negotiation. It's all about bargaining. It's one of the reasons why I think what ESPN has likely done to the Big 12 is so distasteful. I mean, people kind of laugh about this and say, the Big 12 is fighting a losing battle here. But imagine this for a moment. I mean, as I said before, the Big 12's only crime here is just being smaller than the other Power 5 leagues. But it's not like the league was going out of business. It's not like the other programs, as small as they are around Texas and Oklahoma, it's not like they're failed. It's not like they're, at risk, at least that I know of defaulting on any kind of loans or anything like that. They're just a little smaller. And so the ESPN has decided we're just going to allow this conference to be rated because it can be. At least that's the sense that I kind of get. That's the accusation that's out there. And so, part of the whole issue of why it may happen sooner rather than later is I think the ESPN kind of knows, this is my speculation, but it's, based on a lot of what's been, published, is that if you can get most of these schools to the American Athletic Conference, all of a sudden there's no Big 12 left. All of a sudden there's no, every contract that exists for this league can just simply be torn up. It'll be just that easy. I mean, something about that just seems gross to me. And, I joked about tortious interference during the regular show. I obviously don't know enough about the legal proceedings to know what's really happening here or not, but I do know this. If you as a person tried to get a contract, invalidated the way that ESPN's trying to do that right now, you would get in a lot of trouble. Now, maybe ESPN's bulletproof, got enough lawyers that they don't have to worry about this. But you, if you tried to do this, would get in trouble. You got to be really careful about that. Contracts to buy houses, contracts for employment, all kinds of things like that. That if you talk to somebody about, basically breaking their contractual agreement, that's the kind of thing that you would get in trouble for. ESPN may be able to get away with it, but all of that a little bit of a pretext for the question of, I would say that 2022 is far more likely than 2025, just because I don't think anybody wants this thing to drag out until 2025. Reformation Logistics says, I will donate $500 to the next Kroger 5-Star Kid program for the next winter. Reformation, that's a very, very nice thing. It's very, very generous of you, and maybe we can talk about that. That's incredibly nice of you to offer that. Truly an act of generosity, and I really appreciate that. Let's be in touch. We'll discuss that. Jay Shipe says, does Texas really care about their fans sacrificing more losses for just more TV money? No, I really don't think they do. I mean, to me, and we've said this before, that the real scandal in college athletics is not so-and-so conspired to keep Georgia out of the college football playoff. That's not the real scandal. The real scandal is the people in the boardrooms don't care that much about who wins these games anyway. I mean, they just don't. As long as the money's ending up in the right places, that seems to be all that really matters here. And so if Texas comes to the SEC and goes 4-8 for the first 3 years they're in the league each and every year, the Texas administrators will be just still laughing their way to the bank each and every, Saturday, each and every year. And yes, unfortunately, that's all that really matters. And the only thing I can do in response to that is just sort of pretend that it's not true, right? I mean, there are certain things that if you think about them long enough, it just kind of grosses you out. It's the reason why the phrase "how the sausage gets made" it's the reason why it is a phrase. Like, I love sausage. I'm not quite so sure I'd want to see sausage being made. Now, it wouldn't stop me from eating it, but it's just one of those things. I like to see it nice and clean looking, in my, grocer's, freezer. I like to see it there a lot more so than I like to see probably it coming out of the slaughterhouse. That it's just sort of helpful not to think about that. And I think when it comes to college athletics, it's another thing. It's just sort of helpful not to think about what's going on behind the scenes here, because a lot of it is probably pretty gross. Let's get a few more. A lot of really good comments today. Tom Bailey checks in to say Oklahoma has 7 national championships, twice as many as any team in the SEC except Bama. Oklahoma's been doing it through the annals of history. He says Oklahoma was the number 1 team in the history by ESPN. Yeah, I mean, listen, the one thing you will not hear me say is that Oklahoma's history has anything to apologize for. The Oklahoma history, 47-game winning streak, all the things that Oklahoma has in its history, Bud Wilkinson, Barry Switzer, Bob Stoops. You got no beef with me when it comes to the Oklahoma history. I do believe that over the course of the last couple of years, they have taken advantage of a pillow-soft Big 12. And I believe that their inclusion in multiple playoffs recently was not a just outcome. And getting beaten up by LSU, beaten up by Alabama, even losing to Georgia may be some proof of that, although they certainly gave Georgia a tough game at the end of the 2017 season. Nobody can deny that. So if you want to talk about Barry Switzer, if you want to talk about, Bob Stoops winning a national championship with Josh Heupel at quarterback, if you want to talk about Bud Wilkinson, I'm right there with you. Jamel Holloway, I can tell you about growing up watching Jamel Holloway playing quarterback for the Sooners. I'm right there for you. The Oklahoma history looks really good alongside almost any program in the SEC, no denying that. But what Oklahoma has taken advantage of during their time in the Big 12 in the recent years, that does not exist in the SEC. They're going to have to play a more physical brand of football than what they've played in the Big 12 in recent years. Let me do a couple more Facebooks, get ready to go. Jay Shipe says, I'm still in denial about what the sport's turning into. And, I mean, to a degree, I am kind of there as well. I mean, as I said before, right now I'm just leaning into the entertainment value of all of this. It's crazy. There are rumors every day. There's, what Bob Bowlesby did yesterday was very unbecoming. And I'm not saying he shouldn't have done it. I'm just saying you don't typically see conference commissioners roll up their sleeves, kind of like mine are right now, and go, duking it out with ESPN the way that Bowlesby did yesterday. That's very unusual for a conference commissioner to do that. It's just an example of these times that we're living in. I think we're heading for something that's worse than what we currently have, but the only choice I really have is to be entertained by it, make it hopefully entertaining for all of you. But, I mean, I know it sounds corny, right? But I really do care about the kids who play this sport because, I've always loved high school football, right? And I like youth sports, the group of people who go on to play high school football. And I do believe that the reason that football is so popular is because it serves a purpose. If it didn't serve a purpose, it would not be as popular as it was. And the purpose that it serves is I think it teaches young boys how to be men. And it's not always perfect, and there's idiots that get involved in coaching every now and then, but by and large, predominantly across the span of time and across the width of the country, football does a really good job of training boys in how to be men. And I think the more you let transfer portal creep into that and name, image, likeness creep into that, and basically the kind of realignment of a mini version of the NFL at the exclusion of most of the rest of the country. I mean, I do think fewer young boys will be trained up to be good men because of all that. And yeah, a handful of people may get a lot richer because of that, but honestly, I'm not making any of that money, so why do I care about that? I sort of care about the common good that the sport produces, and I do think we're about to get less of that, which is not to say that, I don't know. I'll just leave that at that. Let me get Texas Dog, then I'll go back to Facebook, who says, I think they're going to do the pod system in order to have every team play each other at least once in the 4-year span. We'd also have to start playing 9 SEC games. Yeah, I'm just not quite so sure how the scheduling part of this is going to work. I'm not quite so sure about that. I don't know that – I mean, like this is kind of a – you talk about, like nothing mattering more than money. Here's the one reason why they might consider not going to the pods. It's just slightly cheaper to keep it at divisions. It's slightly less travel for the teams if they're playing. If Georgia's playing South Carolina and Tennessee and Auburn every single year, that's just sort of slightly cheaper than if they were rotating more frequently in Baton Rouge or Texas A&M or Texas and Oklahoma. So this may be an example where it's just a little bit cheaper to keep a geographic divisional format because it means a little bit less travel. I mean, the longest road trips in this league now are going to be pretty long. And I think I could foresee them maybe wanting to just sort of pinch that penny if they possibly could. Jonathan Moore said that Connor had a real good projected division and schedule outline. Y'all check that out at DawgNation.com. You can see more of that. Let's see where else. Matt Rukavina says, as a Texas resident, I can say the Southeast stops in Houston. You get to Austin and it's Southwest. Yeah, I mean, I don't think you have to look any further than Nashville and the current state of country music to know that just because you're in the South doesn't mean you're of the South, if you get what I'm saying on that. I think you see a lot of examples of that. Bill Sanders says Red River Shootout will now be SEC style. And I have to admit, like, as much as I'm kind of against this, the idea of that Red River Shootout or whatever, name they've given the game now, painting an SEC logo on the field there at the Texas State Fair for that game, that does kind of seem kind of cool. I mean, that is a little bit of a manifest destiny takeover that I do think is kind of interesting. I'm not saying it's worth all the trouble, but that's an example of that now being one of the SEC rivalries, and now we'll compare Georgia-Florida to that other SEC rivalry, between Texas and Oklahoma. I think that, I don't hate that. I'll just say it that way. I don't hate that. Let's see what else. We'll get ready to go. I've kind of gotten where the comments have kind of stretched here a little bit. Anything else? Don McPherson says, I think the SEC, by the way, I'm assuming this is not the former Syracuse head coach, Don McPherson, but I think the SEC should adopt a new rule. No more orange, burgundy, crimson, or maroon will be accepted. You must be green to qualify for the SEC. We don't have any green teams. I think that's actually a really pretty good point. So much of the SEC is like, this is how you know your league's too big. You got like 3 Tigers. You got, I got all the SEC helmets on the wall here, and it really is about half this league has the same color football helmet, which is kind of strange. I also saw the thing the other day where I'm colorblind, so a lot of this is lost on me, but South Carolina hung a new banner outside Williams-Brice Stadium. Their color is garnet, which is, I guess, a redder version of burgundy, but the banner was accused of being maroon. Now, listen, to my eyes, I just can't tell the difference. Like I said before, I'm plagued by color blindness. But this was such a controversy in Columbia. This was a multi-day story. In fact, I still think it's going on because I think they're actually now going to replace it. This was like a 3-day story in Columbia of the maroon sign that was not the right South Carolina color. So I'm with you. We got to get more distinctive colors in the SEC because too many of these teams have the same colors.
When Texas and Oklahoma get officially invited into the league later today, are you going to also go out and officially get Texas and Oklahoma helmets and another shelf to put on the wall?
That is such a good point. So this is our set for SEC Country Live. I did not think about this. This is really problematic because if you notice, we have fairly good symmetry here. Now, Our house style around here is the 2 teams that played in the conference championship are supposed to have the top billing there. Somebody
said you've got BA's favorite 2 teams.
Yeah, so somebody put Texas A&M next to Georgia as a way of joking with me, and I just never changed it back. But if you notice, we have the the 6 on the one side, the 6 on the other, the 2 and up at the top. I mean, honestly, this is how you know the SEC is too big. Like, we don't have enough space on our wall for the SEC helmets. I have not thought about that up until now, but that is a really good point. I guess it's all moot because we're about to get a new studio anyway. But that is a really, really good point. G. Grace says, dang, BA still going. No, we're getting off the air now. So now that you're here, G. Grace, we're leaving. No, I'm kidding. But we do have to go. Very interesting stuff. We'll obviously follow it. Today, the official invitation could be extended, and it is an invitation that Oklahoma and Texas will then accept, and Texas A&M is going on with the ride on all this too. So we'll come back, talk to you more about it tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp. Also, huge thanks to our friends at R.S. Andrews, making the R.S. Andrews cool down possible. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric. You can trust R.S. Andrews to do all of that for you. Find them online at rsandrews.com. Also, check out my friends at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, ajc.com. Report on the Braves up in New York. Tough one last night. Braves had their chances, man. And they finally dropped the game 2-1. They get a chance to at least win the series against the Mets here today in what is an unusual 5-game slate. But honestly, you had a chance to cut this division lead down to 2 for the Mets. And when it's all said and done, you're like right back there at 4 where you've kind of been the entire time. It's just like the Braves cannot break through that 4 games back ceiling, which probably lets you know they're probably not a very good team right now. But they're trying to make their move here before the trade deadline. And so we'll see if they can at least win the series against the Mets later on today after they, for the most part, wasted a Max Fried performance last night. They'll score 15 runs one night. They'll score 1 run the next night. And they've just been kind of in that mode as of late. But you can read all about it. Atlanta Journal-Constitution, AJC.com. Falcons in training camp right now. Hawks NBA draft. This is one of those things that has really snuck up on me. But the NBA draft is when? Tonight. Yeah, so this is totally snuck up on me. I have no idea who's even the projected top picks, but I'm sure I'll stumble over there and watch that a little bit there too. So good stuff all the way around. Also Olympics coverage there from Tokyo. A lot of local flair to all of that. We continue to look back on 25 years since the Atlanta Games, an event that really changed the city of Atlanta. And the AJC's got very interesting coverage of that. Find them online, ajc.com for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Y'all have a great day. See you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp. 10 a.m. We'll talk to you then. For more DawgNation videos, check out youtube.com/DawgNation.